Most English learners believe something like this: native speakers don't make mistakes. But that's not true. Native speakers make mistakes all the time. And here's the important part. These mistakes are not random. There are reasons why they happen. So in this video, I'm going to show you the most common mistakes native speakers make, why they happen, and what this means for you. So I've split this into 3 categories. We have thinking mistakes, when people make mistakes in real time; language change, where the mistakes are becoming normal now; and the last one is accent and dialect influence. So let's start with the first one, which I think is the most important. So the first thinking mistake I want to show you is the use of conditionals. So occasionally I will hear someone say something like, if I would have known, I would have done it differently, right? Which maybe you know is a mistake. Maybe you've had a grammar class on the third conditional. So what should it be? It should be, if I had known, I would have done it differently. So why does this happen? I mean, we are native speakers after all, right? Well, I think it's because we think I would first, and the sentence is already moving, right? But our brain switches structures, but the grammar can't catch up, so we just keep going. And you will hear mistakes with the third conditional quite a lot. Now, this mistake is an absolute classic, and recently I did a video for another company interviewing people on the street, and I had loads of comments. Why is this person saying there's many people, or something like this? And it's because we're thinking quickly and we just say there's first, and unfortunately it's a plural afterwards. So we say, oh, there's many people, or there's 2 people sitting down, like this. But of course it should be there are 2 people. Now I have a prediction, which is in the future we will only say there is. And there are many other languages that are like that. Maybe in 100 years. So if you're watching in 2126, please let me know. The next mistake is a funny one because, you know, I've had so many students over the years. I've been teaching English for nearly 20 years, and it's mixing the infinitive, right, like to go, and the gerund going. And so, for example, you'll hear a native person say, I suggested to go to something, right? Instead of, I suggested going. And it's not because we don't know it, but because we're thinking so quickly, we're speaking quickly, and we're not monitoring, we're not checking our grammar while speaking. So you will hear this mistake quite a lot. The next one is a bit of a pet peeve of mine, and it is uncountable nouns. So I do hear some native speakers say, for example, I need some advices on this, and it should be I need some advice, right? Or some informations, and it should be a piece of information. So this is also quite common. Well, not that common, but I do hear it. And why? Well, I think it's because when we're not thinking carefully, we just hear a word and we think plural, add an S. Just like, you know, learners of English. And you occasionally hear native speakers do it too. Okay, the next one is a little bit similar, and it's plurals. So sometimes it's uncountable, like furniture, and I hear people say furnitures, which is of course incorrect, and sheeps. So we're in the field now. I can't see any sheeps. Of course, we just say sheep, right, for singular and plural. Fishes. However, you can actually use the word fishes when you have different groups of fish, so different species, then actually it is correct. But many people use it incorrectly. The next one is a funny one, and it's double negatives. So maybe someone will say, I didn't do nothing, right? I didn't do nothing. That means you did something. So it should be, I didn't do anything. But actually, you will hear dialects and in America and England, and people say that a lot. You know, I didn't do nothing, or I ain't got nothing to say, right? But it should be, if you ain't got nothing, then you have something. So it's quite funny. But yeah, so this is a mistake, but you do hear it quite a lot. The next one is extremely common, and it's sentence breaks and restarts. Let me give you some examples. So I think it's not exactly easy, but so you see I start the sentence but change straight away. Or it's important because actually there are two reasons. So you see that's a sentence break because I started the sentence and then I broke it. And this is a completely normal thing. And native speakers use it all the time. And you can too, because this is what happens when we're thinking and speaking in any language. The next one is interesting because it brings in, whoa, it's really bright. The next one is a good one, and it's the difference between less and fewer. So you'll hear so many native speakers say, there are less people here today, instead of, there are fewer people here today, right? Fewer is countable, less is uncountable. That's the rule. So why does this happen? Well, I think not many native speakers actually know the difference, but it's also about speed, simplicity. You know, less is shorter, easier, and more automatic. But this makes me think about something really important and interesting when we talk about grammar. There are two different types of grammar, descriptive grammar and prescriptive grammar. Prescriptive grammar is like the grammar we see in textbooks. You know, when I first started teaching English when I was 18 years old, nearly 20 years ago, I had my first grammar book, Grammar in Use by Raymond Murphy. If you have that book, write it in the comments. I've got this, and let me know. But that was the book. And, you know, there are rules with grammar, and this is how you should speak. This is how you should write. That is prescriptive grammar. Descriptive grammar is how do people speak, right? Because if everyone starts speaking in a certain way, is it wrong? No, it just shows that grammar is changing. And I think this is an example of that. People are using less, more. They're using less, the word less, more. And it's no longer wrong, really. Next one is double comparatives. So you'll sometimes hear, this one is more better, or it's more easier. And maybe you're thinking, why are native speakers making such simple mistakes? And I think it's the same thing. The speaker starts with more and is thinking of the word, and they've just realized they wanted to say better. So they just switch to and say better and end up combining both. So again, the brain changes direction and the grammar doesn't keep up. So maybe you're thinking, why does this whole category exist? And it's because speech is not like writing, right? Writing is planned, but speaking is improvised. We're thinking on the spot. So native speakers start sentences before finishing the idea, guilty. They change direction halfway, and grammar becomes a little bit messy. Part 2 is about language change, so not really mistakes, because some mistakes aren't mistakes anymore. They're just modern English. Let me give you some examples. So the first example is pronoun combinations. Let me explain. It's very common. So people might say, me and John went to the shop, or myself and John went to the shop. And I think people often think they are trying to sound posh, you know. Myself and John went to the shop, but it's grammatically wrong. It should be John and I went to the shop. But so many people speak like this that it's kind of not seen as a mistake anymore. So the next one, maybe you don't even know is a grammar mistake when we think about prescriptive grammar, but it is, and it is ending sentences with prepositions. So that was the old rule, never end a sentence with a preposition. But today we say, who are you talking to? Completely normal. Compare these two examples. We have, this is the book I told you about, right? That's natural. Or what we should say is, this is the book about which I told you, right? That sounds very formal and very unnatural, actually. And, you know, there is a funny story. I think it was Winston Churchill who was asked, what do you think about ending sentences with prepositions? And he said, this is the sort of nonsense up with which I will not put. Right? Nowadays, we would say, this is the sort of nonsense I will not put up with. So it's quite funny, but yeah, it's completely fine to end sentences with prepositions. The next one isn't so much a mistake, but more of a change. And it's whom, the word whom, disappearing. You see, most people just say, who did you speak to? We don't really say, whom did you speak to? But it's funny because my first year teaching English in Korea, I taught a middle school grade 2 class on using the word whom, because that was in the book. That was their curriculum. And it's quite funny because hardly anyone uses the word whom in real life. Next one is a really interesting change, and it's using they as a singular pronoun. So for example, someone left their phone, and this is used a lot now, but it used to be criticized because before that we would have said someone left his or her phone. And before the 1970s, we would have said someone left his phone. So his would have meant a woman or a man. So you see how language is changing so much. So yeah, it's fully accepted now, even in formal English. So someone left their phone. This next one does annoy me a little bit, and it's overusing the word literally, especially when it doesn't mean literally. So for example, I literally died laughing. Obviously that's not true, but now dictionaries include this meaning. The next one is a bit of a funny one, and it's using the phrase could care less. So you'll sometimes hear, I could care less. They're trying to say that they don't care. But think about it. I could care less. Because if you could care less, it means you still care. So what people actually mean is, I couldn't care less. So in other words, I don't care at all. And I think this phrase, it may come from sarcasm, or it has just become a fixed expression over time. So I guess meaning always beats logic, if you know what I mean. I'll explain up here what I mean. The next one is using the word like as a filler. So there are some grammarians, people that, I don't know, study grammar or write grammar books. They will hate this, but we use it a lot. So for example, I was like, no way. And she was like, whoa. So older generations may avoid using this, but younger speakers will use it naturally. This next one is a memory from my school days, and it's starting sentences with and or but. So you might have learned, don't start a sentence with and or but. And I remember my teacher hitting me. Oh wait, I don't think she hit me. I think she just scolded me, right, verbally, shouted at me, not to start a sentence with but. But today it's pretty normal, and often it's even very effective. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. Next one is splitting infinitives. So you already know the infinitive is to go, to do, and splitting it would mean we put a word in between to go. For example, to boldly go where no man has gone before. That's a famous phrase from a series called Star Trek. But old grammar rules said this was wrong, but today nobody really cares. Let me give you another example. So we should say he decided to change his life completely. But nowadays we will all say he decided to completely change his life. I think it's more dynamic and easier, and it sounds natural, so people use it. Now, before we move on to accent and dialect, I want to teach you a little bit about how language is changing because of Gen Z and Gen Alpha. So nowadays, they are changing how grammar is used and how meaning is expressed. So you'll hear things like, the movie was mid, the word mid, and that means kind of average, like disappointing, or it's giving. So it's giving main character energy, and that means it has the vibe of, right? It feels like it's giving. By the way, I'm too embarrassed to actually use these words and phrases in public because I am not of that generation. Some other funny ones, he ate that. There is no eating involved here, everyone. It just means he did that extremely well. Or using maxing. So they're combining words. For example, he's looks maxing. And that means he's trying to improve his appearance as much as possible. You might hear gym maxing, money maxing, sleep maxing. So they're creating new words. I find it really interesting. So if you hear these new words, don't worry, it's Gen Z or Gen Alpha having fun. Welcome to the last section. If you're still here, thanks for being here with me. So this is all about accent and dialect influence, because sometimes mistakes happen because people write exactly how they speak. And I used to do this too. So it's still too bright. I'm going to leave my glasses on. I'm sorry. But for example, I should have gone. I should have gone home. I should have gone to school. Should have sounds a little bit like should of. And I remember being about 9 or 10 and writing should of in my book, and my teacher saying that it was wrong. And I thought, why is it wrong? That's what I say. But that's because of my accent, should of. Now I don't say that. I say should have gone. But just a little example for you. Another example is from Yorkshire, where we are now, and that is mixing the words was and were. So you might hear things like, I were tired, or we was going, or we was off to pub. That means we were off to the pub. Or there was loads of people. It should be there were loads of people, right? So in standard English, yes, these are incorrect, but in many dialects, it's completely normal. Another interesting one is people write their pronunciation. So I had a look, or using gonna. Gonna is quite normal now. Or we're going to pub. And that is their accent, right? Kind of overlapping into their writing. Another example that is maybe dialect and accent, or just a mistake native speakers make a lot, which is homophones in writing. So your and your, or there, and there. I'm sure you have done these exercises in class. Let me know if you have in the comments, or maybe it's and its, right? So these words sound identical, the same in speech. So when people write quickly, they often choose the wrong form. And this isn't a speaking problem. Remember, this is a writing problem. So what should you take from all this? What does this mean for you? Well, I think 1, don't aim for perfection. Even native speakers don't speak perfectly. 2, focus on communication, because in real conversations, clarity, right, being clear about what you want to say is more important than grammar perfection. And the last one is learn both types of English. Okay, you need standard English for exams, work, writing, but also listen and learn real spoken English for conversations. And that's why I've been interviewing people in these villages, so you can really hear how native speakers speak. Okay, we have come to the end of the video. If you are still here, it's still bright, but I want to say thank you so much for being with me. I hope you learned something interesting. Let me know in the comments what the most interesting mistake was. And to show that you reached the end, maybe you could start your comment by using and or but at the start. Okay? All right. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in another video. Bye-bye.